What's up, guys? I'm coming today at you with one of the most, horrific stories I've ever read. And I've read a lot. I've seen a lot, like watched a lot, movies, TV shows, whatever. Nothing came this close to me being completely mind blown, out of proportion, what the human race is capable of actually doing and inflicting on other people. And I'm talking about Alistair Urquhart's book, The Forgotten Highlander, where he basically depicts the sheer amount of cruelty and torture he has gone through when he was captured by the Japanese in the Second World War. And his main goal was to shed light on the atrocities because, if we mention the Second World War, it's always Holocaust and Nazis. But the Japanese did some pretty horrific things as well, as he described here. So I think it was also like him trying to confront the past and working up his traumas because, as I will get into, he still carried the trauma until his death in 2000. We'll get to it. I'm not completely sure right now, but he got 97 years old. And that's remarkable considering what he went through. And I mean, it's proof of like your willpower, basically, of survival. And so he carried that on until late age. And I will just get right into it because he was trying to put this into words and he struggled. So I will make no justice, make the story no justice at all. But I will try my best to convey what I have read in this book because I think it tells tales about human brainwashing, ideology, torture, and also the beauty of life and willpower. So, so basically, he recounts in this book his imprisonment, starting in Singapore, then Burma, which is basically Malaysia nowadays, I think. No, Myanmar, actually, sorry, Myanmar. And in Thailand for 3.5 years. He was used, or basically he got captured, I think in 1941, if I'm not too wrong about this. In Singapore, he was stationed there by the British command, and his troop was the Highlanders, which was like a special unit of very capable men. He was particularly fit, he was well liked, young guy, like aspiring soldier, but he didn't actually want to go. But he felt it was his duty, of course, to defend his home country if it was being invaded. Different mentality back there. Nowadays it's like, whatever, I don't care about my nationality. But those were different times, and you can definitely tell. So anyway, the Japanese pretty much ran over the Singapore station where he and his fellow comrades were trying to defend the utilities over there. And it was no deal for the Japanese, and so he got captured. And pretty quickly he noticed the strictness and a completely different mindset when it came to war on the Japanese side. I mean, they were famous for Pearl Harbor, basically, and also being like bombed, like the only instance in history where actually atomic bombs were used. But they also did the Death Railway, or they built it with the help of the imprisoned soldiers and captives, which stretched from Burma to Thailand, or Bangkok, basically, through the jungle. And Alistair was also stationed there. And basically, as I found out later in the book, there were different, or he found out later as well, during his time there were different, basically, groups that were being organized by the Japanese, and you were put into one of the groups and then stationed somewhere. And some groups were treated better, some groups were treated worse. And his group was famous for being treated the worst among all, because he actually was relieved from his work when he wasn't able to walk anymore. I'll get to that later. And then he was recovering and then got put into another group. And soldiers talked and were like, hey, sometimes we got days off, sometimes we were provided with like gourmet food, and the people actually cared about us. But in his camp, in his station, like unimaginable horror. Okay, so he was used, as mentioned, to build the Burma Railway, and it was also called the Death Railway because basically one worker died for every sleeper laid on the Death Railway, which amounted to tens of thousands, I think up to 60,000 or something died during the construction work there, under horrific conditions, of course. So the only thing they were allowed to eat were basically roughly 1,000 calories of rice every day. Just rice, that's it. Alistair was talking about finding hibiscus here and there in the jungle, which he was sure wasn't gonna poison him, so he put that at least in there to have some sort of flavor. And yeah, then it was just boiled water and basically willpower. While working on the railroad, Urquhart suffered from malnutrition, diphtheria, malaria, beriberi, which is a vitamin deficiency, and basically ulcers that ate away his flesh. Like he was seeing some soldiers like bare bone, like on the legs, because the parasites were eating the flesh. There was cholera and of course torture at the hands of his captors. He and the others sooner or later created nicknames like the Dr. Death, for example, for someone who was like particularly cruel to them. And yeah, the only hope of salvation was basically death or rescue. You could not defend yourself against the torture methods of the Koreans and the Japanese, which, in his words, shook your will enormously. And when you hear adult soldiers on the ground begging for their lives, it simply breaks your morale, as well as the circumstances do anyway already. And when men with the same illnesses came to the infirmary, which was just like a hut of wood they were supposed to build prior to actually working on the railway, well, they were just treated with placebo, water and herbs, as nothing else was provided there. It was only a matter of the mind to get well again. Like the doctor stationed there, who cared deeply about his fellow comrades, of course, he told Alistair, well, there are people coming here with exactly the same symptoms and diseases, and one dies and one survives. Like, there's nothing more than willpower at this point, your struggle for survival, that you have something to return to, if it's family, if it's God, if it's your children, whatever, just something to get out of it that keeps your body and mind functioning somehow. So, in the boiling hot jungle, the working conditions were catastrophic. You imagined things, you hallucinated, you stumbled around like a zombie on the roots that were stretching out of the ground, basically. And if that wasn't enough already, people were increasingly suffering from depression because everyone was just trying to survive. There was hardly any talking during the work itself because it was just like so mind-bending, and your will to simply communicate was suppressed, because of the horrors. And there were no tears, because this pain they suffered was beyond tears, it's just not on the scale for it. He was, as mentioned, particularly unlucky to be assigned to this labor camp, as the other camps were treated slightly better sometimes. But in his department, the tyranny and strictness of the Japanese came to the forefront. Because if you brainwash people enough and give them permission to be cruel, they will do it. It was a situation that, was just horrific on every level. The heart works constantly, it tries to beat, but the soul never forgets. And after his work at the Kwai Bridge, there's also this famous movie, but he was like, no, there were no beautiful women walking there, we didn't have clothes, we didn't have water, the Japanese weren't talking to us. It was just like pure work and dying, basically, and disease. The movie depicted it in a different manner, like Hollywood style, they try to uplift the mood. Actually, if you want to see a great war movie, watch Come and See. It's probably the second most horrific thing I've ever seen. Great movie though. But yeah, after his work on the Kwai Bridge, where he was later transitioned to, and you can imagine like it's a 900-kilometer train ride, you don't know where you're going, complete darkness, you couldn't lay down or sit, you were just standing hoping for the fresh air to come in, and people around you were dying, like, and suffering, and yeah, they had to relieve themselves on the spot, so the smell was unbearable, and yeah, sooner or later he finally collapsed with cholera and barely knew his name anymore. He couldn't walk, and out of the 13 people in the doctor's wooden hut, also diagnosed with the cholera, because like the Japanese took a distance because they noticed, okay, something's going on here, new disease. He was the only survivor, he was later told. So Alistair was taken to a better hospital in Chongqing, where he was nursed back to health by an Australian doctor. And for almost 6 months, he tried to make the symptoms seem worse, avoid contact with any soldiers, to have the most time possible in this hospital, which was decently well equipped, And then he was basically sent back to the jungle to work in just as bad conditions as prior. And after working on the railroad and in the Singapore docks, Urquhart was loaded into the hold of the Kachidoki Maru, an American passenger and cargo ship captured by the Japanese. And yeah, it was used as a hell ship to transport hundreds of prisoners from A to B. The ship was part of a convoy bound for Japan. But during the journey, the prisoners suffered worse than even during the construction of the railroad. Alistair said this was by far the worst experience he has ever had on this hell ship. Because I tried to lay this down, for you to understand, but the people in there were basically in a dark warehouse, in the ship, in the container ship, with thousands of others. Everyone was first for themselves. You couldn't sit and you couldn't lay, of course. Everyone relieved themselves again. And the smell was so terrible that even when the ship's doors were open, the air didn't get any better. And there were instances of disease, dehydration, and cannibalism. Urquhart described that the enormous thirst drove the soldiers mad, and they started killing the others to drink their blood. So it was literally everyone by himself. There were no friends anymore, there were no comrades. It didn't matter what your nationality was, it was just pure survival. And when the Americans sooner or later found out that they sinked the wrong ship, because on September 12, 1944, exactly that happened. The ship was torpedoed and sunk by the US submarine, USS Pampanito, whose commander knew nothing of the prisoner cargo, of course, because the Japanese did not adhere to the Geneva Conventions of the war and marked their weapon ships with the White Cross instead of the prisoner transports. And when the Japanese opened the cargo and they saw the people going completely mad, they were themselves horrified of what has happened on these hell ships, I can just imagine, if you see cannibalism, that's the lowest level of what you can bear, I think, what's bearable. So yeah, the ship was sunk and Alistair was covered in oil when it sank, swallowed some of that oil, which also permanently damaged his vocal cords for life. He drifted for 5 days without food or water in a one-man raft before being picked up by a Japanese whaling ship and taken back to Japan. In Japan, Urquhart was sent to work in a coal mine for the Aso Mining Company, and later to a labor camp 10 miles from Nagasaki. Nagasaki should ring a bell. Yeah, he was there when the city was bombed by the United States with the atomic bomb. And when he was finally rescued by the troops a couple of weeks later, he was found weighing 43 kilograms, and that was, after he had been already treated at a hospital wing for the last few weeks. His stomach had shrunk to, as much like to like a small, like not even comparable to the original size chunk of meat, basically, that any kind of new food or spice or chocolate would have meant certain death. He wrote, and I cite, "I still have to eat rice 2 or 3 times a week with some fish or chicken. Anything else upsets my insides. One of my favorite dishes in Singapore was a curry, but never again. Just 1 onion is enough to upset me. The Imperial Army diet and years of dysentery had destroyed my stomach lining and caused irreparable damage." He published the book in 2010 and died in 2016 at the age of 97. Until his death, he carried the images that burned themselves into his memory. He had to sleep separately from his wife because he feared attacking her at night, as a protective reflex. So, as you can just imagine, it took a toll on his mental, but also his physical, like not being able to eat everything you want for the rest of your life and being restricted to rice just because of the 3.5 years where he was fed rice every day. Like, that's so mind-blowingly insane to me. And like, that just shows you like the cruelty of war, you know. And I think it's a very difficult topic to talk about in general, and also if the public should be seeing this, because the images of war are so horrific that you lose faith in humanity. And I believe actually in the good of humanity, and that we're just being guided in wrong directions and think we are doing good when we're actually doing bad. And these images and videos don't help manifest that image of humanity. So I'm not sure if it's like a false optimism I'm hoping for, or if it's delusion, or but this just shows you what we are capable of, and also that we're capable of survival even in the hardest conditions. So get the book yourself, it's down in the description, and thank you for watching. Have a nice day.